Hey, what's going on? It's Quinn David Furness. Welcome to my show. Quinn David Furness presents the Beantown Podcast for Friday, September 24th, 2021, the last Friday of September. What's going on? How are you? My name is Quinn. This is my show. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate the support. It's good to see you. We are live on YouTube, which is very exciting. Something that I haven't done too much of lately. Frankly, just haven't made the effort. And, live streaming in general, I know we mentioned Twitch and all that good stuff last week. It's just, it's like I kind of like the allure of being behind the scenes, living in the shadows. I'm a lurker on Reddit, so why can't I be a podcast lurker as well? I don't do this podcast, contrary to what you might think. I don't do this show to get famous or be in, big bright lights. I'm kind of here to just be a voice of the people. We are the people's podcast. That's one of our taglines. And we don't whip out too frequently, but it is true. We are one of the top 500 podcasts on the north side of Chicago. We are the people's podcast. We are your number one source for misinformation. And my name is Quinn David Furness, the Karachi King. Hello to all my friends out there. Hyderabad, Karachi, Khyber Pass, and other areas where podcasts are found. If you're listening to this, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up on Facebook, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's some other stuff on there as well, including a really bad Brian McKnight cover from 2 weeks ago. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. And whatever podcast app you're listening to us on, thank you for streaming today. Beantownpodcast.com/podcast or beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. Again, it's beantownpodcast@yahoo.com. You might be out there thinking, Quinn, you don't know how to spell. What is that? Okay. This is what, episode 194? You figure you would know how to spell by now. And I got to tell you, that ties very nicely into what we're talking about today on the show. It's not going to be a terribly long episode because really we're going to do a Real Housewives check-in episode 2 of season 2 was last Sunday. And then we're going to get into kind of what we're talking about today, which is a smaller topic. Essentially, if you're curious where we're going, words that have multiple spellings, multiple acceptable spellings. I'm not talking homonyms, him, H-I-M, him, H-Y-M-N, that sort of thing. We're talking and the example that got me thinking about this was, and it wasn't because I talked about this on my show a month ago, but canceled versus canceled. I was spelling it out, and I'll get to the context in a second. It's not that interesting, but I'll get to the context in a second. I was spelling it out first with 2 L's because I feel like that's just the natural thing. Then I started looking at it, and I was like, is that one too many L's? And then I went down to the 1 L, like I'm starting law school, and I was like, well, that looks a little thin. So I'm caught, torn between these two warring factions, 1L, 2L. I just need a summer externship placement, and I've got 2/3 of my law school career done. But so I went and looked it up, and I'm like, what's the correct way to go about this? Do we want 1L? Do we want 2 L's? And I learned either is acceptable. So that got me thinking, and that's pretty much the context behind the story. I mean, it's not, you don't really need to know, but I had a software test, a live call scheduled for later, right after work, and it got canceled. Keyword, and I don't even remember. I can look at the site. What word do they use, or what spelling do they use? They use 1L. The mystery deepens. Cancels has only 1L on you without 24 hours notice, and this was 3 hours notice, something like that. So I want to go in there and get my, you don't get fully compensated, but I can make it was supposed to be a 30-minute $30 thing. So I'm hoping to get at least 15 out of it, just for sending an email, because it's my trouble. I had committed to work after 5 on a Friday, which I don't like to do. Anyone who knows me, it's not my deal. So that's where we're going to be spending some time. I pulled up a list of words on the internet. It's a great place to find words where we can look at some alternative spellings. and kind of see what fun stories we encounter along the way. So first and foremost, we're going to be doing our Real Housewives of Salt Lake City recap. And it won't be that long because I feel like Real Housewives of Salt Lake City season 2 probably got saved by the whole Jen Shah stuff, because the rest of it is just like, it's still good. Like, I'm invested in the characters enough to want to like watch them and their families and see what's going on. But we really haven't had any amazing like interactions yet. Not a lot of like drama between ladies, because they keep referencing like, oh, the last time we were all together, the last time we spoke, and then they'll show a flashback to the season 1 reunion, which, if you don't know how they do it in Real Housewives, is like the women tell all of The Bachelor. Essentially, Andy Cohen sits down. They film it at some point after they finished filming the season, sometimes months later, but then they'll just show it the week after the season finale. So it all feels like it's all together, and then you have this big break between airing of seasons. And so, I think when they're filming what we're seeing here on season 2, episode 2, is like 2 months after they filmed the reunion. And the women are basically saying, outside of the obvious ones, like Heather and Whitney, because they're cousins, like they see each other all the time, I'm sure. But a lot of them, and they certainly haven't been all in the same room together since the reunion was filmed. One thing I was going to mention, and I apologize to everyone listening, but I have to rely a little bit more on like notes and a crutch to get through the recap. And the reason why is because this season of Real Housewives, they're airing it on Sunday nights. And previously, season 1, I think, was Wednesday nights to, middle of the week, something like that, Wednesday or Thursday. And for me, honestly, that was just so much better, because I have time on Sundays. Like, I'm around when it airs typically, but I'm almost always watching football. So it's just like, if I'm watching it when it airs, I got football and that on screen, so 2 screens. Or if I watch it later, I'm usually just like, I don't know. I can't really explain it, but I'm less attentive. I don't think I'm less interested or engaged. I'm still really interested, but it's a little bit tougher to remember. So that's my disclaimer. So we did episode 1 last week. Here's your brief rundown of all 7 ladies now, which is tough. 7's a lot to just like give airtime to. In contrast, this season that finished of New York a couple weeks ago, or like 2 months ago, something like that, was only 5. That's a big difference in terms of like airtime. So we've got 6 OGs from last year, 1 new addition. We've got Heather and Whitney. They're blonde. They're cousins. Is that right? Heather. Yeah. Heather is divorced. She has 3 like teenage daughters. Used to be a Mormon. It's not anymore. Whitney's got 3 young kids. She's like Minnie Mouse. She slept with her boss, then got divorced to her original husband, is now married to her boss, Justin. We like Whitney. She's kind of wild. And then, we like Heather too, but she's got some like, not negative qualities, but just what we're going to get to at the very end of this episode is one of the reasons why I'm like, Aunt Heather, like, come on, girl. Then you've got Lisa, who's like New York, New Jersey accent, something like that. She's got 2 boys, like kind of teenager, her husband, and she runs some business. I don't really understand what it is. Maybe she's in on the Jen Shah drama. Who knows? Then there's Meredith, went to Loyola Law School. She's got a couple kids. One of her sons, Brooks, is like always on the show. He's a key feature of this episode. And our husband, Seth, who I think is now like season 1, he was going back and forth between Akron. I thought I heard something about like Mississippi in this episode or something. I don't know if that's accurate. I'll circle back and we'll check in on it. Then we've got Mary Cosby. She's married to her grandmother's widow, Robert Cosby or something like that. And she doesn't really do anything in this show. Moving on. We've got Jen Shah, who we all know about. We all talk about. She's the worst. In this episode, made her look really bad too, for something that we've never talked about before. We'll get to that in a second. And then we have Jenny, the new one. I don't even know Jenny's last name. So there's Jen and Jenny on this show, which is just like, okay, it's kind of silly at this point. Jenny hasn't really done much lately. She's got 3 kids. They're kind of precocious. They're young. She's married to a doctor, and she's like a stay-at-home mom. Apparently she's Lisa's friend, I think. I don't know. She's kind of like, like girl boss attitude, like not going to take, anyone's shit, which is fine. But outside of that, listener discretion is advised on this Beantown Podcast. Number one, we'll occasionally use language when we're talking about Housewives. Number two, this show is objectively terrible. But outside of that, and it's only been 2 episodes, okay? But we really haven't gotten to see much else from Jenny so far. So in this episode, we start off, and they always like to do like brief little check-ins with like 3 or 4 of the housewives without a lot of substance. And we basically check in with like, I'm looking on my recap because I can't even remember. Oh, we get a little bit of Mary. Mary has a couple of sons who are like, I don't know, like late teens, early 20s, something like that, like way older than you think they would be. And she goes into one of their rooms, and he's got a mini fridge, and it's just like water and yogurt in there. And there was something else interesting about it, but that's how boring Mary is to me. Like, she wasn't supposed to be on the show originally, and it still feels like season 2, like they didn't plan for her to be on the show. We really don't get anything with her. And in fact, I'll just tell you what happens the rest of the episode with Mary. She's having her house like redesigned, redecorated, or something like that. We saw some of the interior of her house. It was like a putting green, but the entire floor was like that. It was all green. I think the couches and walls are green too. It's kind of like something Trump would do to like represent money. That's Mary Cosby. She's definitely got some weird cult shit going on at the church. And I'm pretty convinced, because she's the one that has like 6 houses, right? There's something maybe not even illegal going on there, but just like taking advantage of the stupid 10% tithing rule of Christians. Hey, you get a couple, Jeff Bezos's in your congregation. 10% of $1 trillion is like 10% of $1 trillion. So that'd be pretty crazy. That's where she gets her houses from. I don't know. And tax exempt. That's the big thing. So let's see. That's basically all we get from Mary. Okay, that's pretty much all you need to know about Mary, and it's essentially the same thing It's always she's just in her house doing something not interesting. There you go. That's 1 down, 6 to go. Okay, so let's talk about Jen this episode. We can do everything up until the end when we'll finish up with our conversation between her and Heather, which I've alluded to when I talked about Heather earlier. But basically, we open in Jen's house, which is the new Shaw Chalet, also being rented. And we get our first Stu Chainz appearance, which is big because Jen's not the only one being indicted for fraud and wire fraud and whatever. Her first assistant, Stuart, also indicted. Stuart, a.k.a. Stu Chainz. Jen, if you don't know, has like 6 assistants or something like that. And so you're like, well, what does she do? Like, how does she pay these people? Great question. Now we know, okay? So, and what do they assist her on? I don't know. What does Stu Chainz do? Apparently illegal wire fraud activity. That explains it. So she's in her like shoe closet, and as you would expect, just like an asinine amount of shoes. And then all of a sudden we're introduced to her nephew, I think it is. His name's like Dewey or something. Dwayne, that's his name. So we're introduced to Dwayne, a new person. He's like this, chill looking, like, I don't know, mid-20s-year-old black guy. And he's like, Auntie, you have way too many shoes. And it's like, yeah, we're all thinking that. But then we learn the backstory of Dwayne. Apparently he was like with his family living in some really awful living situation in Los Angeles, like a bad part of town. And he had reached out to Jen knowing that she was a person of significant means, being like, hey, Auntie, can you help us get out of here? And she left him on read for like multiple months until she was finally like, you know what? I should text Dwayne back. And now he lives with her apparently. But this is when I mentioned earlier that this episode did not make Jen look good at all. And we haven't even gotten to the illegal stuff yet. That's going to be like mid-season. She literally is like, her nephew contacts her because obviously he's living in some really dangerous situation or something to seek help. And she's like 6 months later, like, oh yeah, how's that going, by the way? Do you want to come live with me? Instead of like, if I had a nephew, and I don't have a nephew, but if I had a cousin or a sibling or something that was like, hey, get me out of here, I would be like on Expedia 30 seconds later finding a one-way ticket. Like, I don't know. And Jen's like, I was going through all this grief and stuff. My, end of last season, she was having some sort of breakdown with Sharif or something. I don't know. But I'm just like, hey, I have bad days too. I'm still checking email, responding to text. Like, I don't know, Jen. I mean, you're pretty awful. So that's pretty much what's going on with Jen. Oh, but she's connected. Jen is connected to everything here, for better, for worse. So we go to Meredith, and really what Meredith is doing this episode, it's Meredith and Brooks, and Seth makes a guest appearance too. And I think we talked about this last week. Essentially, Jen is directly and indirectly cyberbullying Brooks on social media. What I mean by this is like someone will tweet something homophobic. Not just like casual, but like straight up homophobic about Brooks on Twitter, and she will retweet it, for example. It's the Trump method where you can be like, oh, I didn't actually say that, I just retweeted it. Well, potato, speaking of alternate spellings. And like Instagram, she'll like add something to her story that someone tagged her on. It's like, because basically what this goes down to, and Jen like talks about this in the episode, Jen's upset that Brooks was offended last season when Jen comes over to Meredith's house and she flashed everyone her like actual vagina, and Brooks got upset by that and left the house, not in like a stomping out fashion, but he was with his sister and he's like, okay, we're just gonna go now. He didn't even comment on it, when it happened. He was just like, okay, we're gonna head out, which is perfectly normal when a 45-year-old lady comes over and starts flashing her hoo-hoo. I wouldn't want to be hanging out there either. And so Jen somehow is under the impression that Brooks is like sex shaming her or like anatomy shaming her for something because he chose to leave the house at that point. And so that's her excuse, because Seth is like talking to Meredith okay, here's what happens to kind of tie all this together. Lisa and Jenny go over to Jen Shah's house. It's the first time Jenny and Jen meet. And side note, all Jenny really does this episode is we learn that she's got 3 kids, married to a doctor, and her husband wants more kids, but she does not want to have more kids. Maybe that sets us up for good stuff in the future. I don't know. That's what we know about Jenny this episode. Lisa, we really don't get anything. So Lisa and Jenny go over to Jen Shah's house, and Lisa is like, hey, you got to cool it with the like homophobic cyberbullying of Meredith's son on social media. Like, that's not cool. And in classic Jen fashion, she flips out, not necessarily at anyone, just flipping out in general. And she's like, well, if he wasn't making fun of my vagina, which he hasn't done, by the way, then I wouldn't be sharing homophobic things with him on Twitter or about him on Twitter. And it's just like, she just doesn't get it. Jen has been living in her little world for way too long, got way too comfortable with the big bucks from her illegal wire fraud, and has some serious issues. She's going to need some big time counseling when she heads to the clink, because I don't even like, I'm not a psychologist, but I don't even know like how to get started with someone like her. She is so far gone. It's really wild. So that's basically what like Lisa and Jenny talk about while they're over there. Seth and Meredith talk a little bit about the cyberbullying. Seth's trying to like calm it down. Meredith's pretty pissed off, which I am totally in her camp on that. We talked about Mary Cosby. The only other really kind of interesting thing before we kind of get into like the final act here of the episode, Whitney talks about how her sex life isn't as crazy as it used to be, how she's sometimes only having sex like 3 or 4 times a week, to that I say like, yikes, only 3 to 4 times a week. My goodness. But then she's also talking about like she started some sort of business. I don't know what it is, but she wants it to be $1 billion business. And she's also talking about like, oh my gosh, only having sex 3 or 4 times a week. So I feel like there's kind of a disconnect there. She's got to, not necessarily get her priorities straight, but just like be realistic with her time management assessment. I don't know. She also has like 3 kids. So she's going to have to figure something out there. But the reason I mentioned all this, we get one talking head usually in Housewives, they're like 2 or 3 seconds long. And then sometimes you get a slightly extended one if there's like some sort of joke or some physical humor or something, like 5 seconds. This was a talking head that was like 30 seconds. It took up a lot of the show. And it's basically Whitney talking about, not talking, miming is the best word for it, what sex was like before some point and now after some point. It's not like a fixed point, but just like it used to be really good, now it's like this, etc. But she's like going through all the gyrations and the motions, and it was kind of comical, but it was also kind of just like uncomfy. It was like, okay. And also they let it go for too long. I mean, that was the joke, to let it go for like 20, 25 seconds, but it was just like, all right, like let's keep it moving. That's essentially what Whitney gets to do this episode. So Whitney and Heather get together, and Jen Shah had FaceTimed Heather beforehand on the episode, one of those classic candid FaceTimes. And Jen Shah was basically asking Heather, like, can we get together and talk? Because, and you won't really remember this, but Heather and Jen Shah are like supposed to be friends. But Jen Shah really attacked Heather towards the end of last season, got in her face. The reunion was really ugly, called her a lot of very unflattering names. Like, I think she called her like a manatee or something. Heather's a larger woman, not fat, but just like tall and like solidly built, if you've ever seen her. And so just like very unkind things. And so apparently Jen and Heather have not spoken since the reunion. And so Whitney and Heather get together, and Heather's like, hey, I'm going to go meet up with Jen. Like, wish me luck, essentially. And Whitney says what we're all thinking, basically like, what the F? Like, what does she want? Like, she's been so awful to you and to us, yada, 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 representing the voice of reason. And this is where I mentioned earlier, like, this was my issue with Heather. Not any sort of really bad quality, but she just keeps going back and like being cool with Jen after Jen says all these things, not only to Heather, but like homophobic things about, marry the son. And then eventually we'll see what happens with the, indictment stuff, being arrested. We'll see where Heather stands after that. I don't know. But so the show ends, and this scene, basically Jen and Heather go to this like ice palace. It's actually kind of cool. It looks like the final scene from The Shining. And they talk it out. And for the first like 3 minutes, Jen is basically just doing all the talking, and Heather is like stone-faced as she should be and like not giving in or an inch or anything. And then eventually they just kind of like reconcile. And apparently they're good again. I don't know. And that's episode 2 of season 2 of The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. I hope that was a thorough enough recap for you. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, and we'll do a quick read through. I just got to pull it up here. I promised you the show wouldn't be too long. It'll probably be like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, something like that, because we got some words that I want to explore, which I think will be fun, but it's not like I have a list of 50 and I'm going to read through every single one, because it's only ones that are interesting, I think. Okay, here we go. Home Pride, Oregon. Are you tired of selling your house for less than a quarter of what it's worth, all because you couldn't find a reliable home inspector in time? Well, Oregon listeners, I got good news for you. Home Pride Inspection Services in Bend, Oregon is Central Oregon's new home inspection provider. I felt like I was speaking Farsi or something there. With inspection services, including things like heating and cooling, roofing, plumbing, and so much more. Home Pride Oregon is both contractor certified and home inspection certified, so you know you're getting the good stuff. If you're tired of big real estate's stranglehold on the home inspection market and you want a safe, certified home inspector that you can trust, call Stevie's. My dad. Here's how you can contact him. 541-410-0316. He also accepts texts. Message and data rates may apply, or visit homeprideoregon.com. And Dad did not tell me to tell you all that he accepts texts. I just went out on a wing. Again, that's 541-410-0316, or you can visit homeprideoregon.com. Home Pride Oregon Inspection Perfection. I want to give a shout out to the Samson Q2U series. I mentioned last week it had a lot of crud on it. I did not clean it up, so it still has crud on it. From Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, when God speaks, he uses Samson. Remember during our ad reads when the third thing was the TV guide story and how fun that was for that brief moment of glorious history? I still have it in my ad read notes as the third thing, like talk about the TV guide. That's a heartbreaker. I don't think we've talked about that for like a year. New listeners, if you're curious, when I lived in Baltimore, I didn't own a TV. It sounds silly now because I have 2 TVs, but in Baltimore, I had 0 TVs. And I essentially like had some Spirit points that were expiring, but I couldn't cash them in for a flight because I only had like 17 or something. So they're like, here, you can get this magazine subscription instead. And all the options they offered were pretty awful. Like I would have taken like Sports Illustrated or Playgirl, whatever. But no, it's like, here are all these awful options. TV Guide I thought would be the fun one because it was ironic because I don't have a television. So I did it, and I got the first, I think it was 3 or 4 copies that I got. And it was supposed to be like a year-long subscription. And that's what I got. That was it, 4 copies. That was it. I think I finally recycled those when I left Baltimore. But yeah, for a brief period of time there, despite not having a TV, I had a very good sense of what was on TV. So, I was really living the high life there. Okay, let me just finish up something here. A work email, make sure I know what's going on. And then we will move on to our final ad read. Okay, Bob and Weave. Oh, this is our friends Cuts by Q. Bob and Weave, we all know the hairstyle. We all love it. But how many Chicago-based independent barbers can actually give it to you the way you deserve? Enter Cuts by Q. It's like Enter Sandman, but different. And, a quick shout out. This was Wednesday night. Metallica played a pop-up show at Metro in Chicago, which is like across the street from Wrigley Field. And apparently tickets were really cheap. I wasn't doing anything Wednesday night. I totally would have gone, but I don't really know Metallica. And I didn't want to go by myself. But for anyone who was able to go, I'm sure it was a great time. Metro is like a very small, intimate venue. I imagine that was a great time. Okay, here we go. Cuts by Q has been independently owned and operated since 1995, a fact I'm very proud of. And it's probably one of the better barbershop operations serving Chicago, Cook County, Northwest Indiana, and the greater Chicagoland area. From beehives to bangs, faux hawks to flat tops, and everything in between, you got to call Cuts by Q at 815-298-7200. I'll screen your call because that's just what I do. Or email cutsbyq@yahoo.com. Again, that's cut. It's Q-U-T-Z by Q at yahoo.com. Okay, here we go. Oh, when you need a fresh do, something snappy and new, just call the experts at Cuts by Q. Cuts by Q. All right, good stuff. So welcome to the second half of today's program. It will be much shorter than the first half, I promise. And essentially, we're doing fun with words, specifically words in the English language that could be spelled multiple ways, and either way is perfectly acceptable. It's a fascinating feat of language, if you ask me. And we mentioned earlier sort of what caused this to come about, where I was canceled by a call later after my day job ends. And, we went through that already. So here, I'm getting closer to my computer here. Hello to those of you on YouTube. It's good to see you. And yes, I totally went in, if you're not watching, I totally went in with the natural light. The way my new apartment, I've been living here for 4 months, is set up is the couch is directly in front of my big, I don't think this qualifies as a bay window, but it's a very long window. And so the light streams through there. So when I have a computer facing me on the couch, you're basically just seeing the shadow of me and the light behind me. It's very Jesusical, Jesusical, which is not a word. And I know it's not a word, but it's the best combination of letters I can use to describe how I feel. Sanctical. Is sanctimonious? Is that the same thing as being saint-like? I think sanctimonious has certain negative connotations that I don't particularly want to be associated with. Sanctimonious, making a show of being morally superior to other people. That's not how I feel. I want the holy ring above my head kind of definition without all the moral high ground, my religion is better than yours kind of stuff. Okay. That's what Jesusical means to me. Angelic. Angelic is usually like soft and sweet, not so much focused on the lighting, but I think we're getting closer. We haven't found the perfect word yet. Maybe a new feature of the show, we should have a Merriam-Webster's dictionary next to us, because we always have fun with words and spelling, and it's a very educational program. Okay, I haven't vetted this list. The website is from dailywritingtips.com. 50 words with alternative spellings. All right. Got a hair in my tongue. That's always fun. And this list is according to Merriam-Webster's website. Okay. It says the former spelling is more common than the latter one and is the preferred alternative. However, both are acceptable, such as canceled versus canceled, 1 L versus 2 L's. Okay. So there's our first example. Okay. Here's a good one that I haven't thought of too much, but it makes sense. It's a big word: acknowledgement or acknowledgement. And the big difference comes towards the end, whether you have an E between the G and the M. So you get to acknowledge. The word acknowledge has an E at the end, because otherwise it would be like some weird German medieval something. But when you add the ment to it in order to make it a noun, meaning something that has been acknowledged, I feel like LeVar Burton right now. This is great. I should do this on like Chicago public television or something. WTTW 11. Is that what it is? Hey, sign me up. Looked outside, but no one from television industry was around. That E, does it go between the G and the M? Or when you add the ment to acknowledge, do you slice off that E to get more efficient? I don't know. Apparently, according to Merriam-Webster, the lack of E is the preferred method. Very interesting. Merriam-Webster, famous, Noah were a first name basis, famous for being efficient, which is why he got rid of the E. Okay, next one down. Oh, this is a classic that I had come across very frequently in emails. Advisor versus advisor. The preferred method is with the E, according to Noah, and the alternative option has an O, advisor versus advisor. This is a really interesting one. I feel like, obviously advise has an E, or it'd be advise-o. I probably go with the E in my casual day-to-day life when I'm typing. I think the ADVISOR, like I wouldn't naturally go for that, but I also wouldn't think twice if I saw it. I think of the OR as feeling more like British, and the ER feels a little bit more American, like America. But I don't know. That's just kind of how I feel. This is an interesting one I haven't really thought about, and now that I'm looking at it, the A definitely doesn't look natural to me. Ambience versus ambience. One has an E between the I and the N. One has an A. AMBIENCE is the preferred option. AMBIANCE. And you will hear some people getting really fancy when they say ambiance or ambience. This is America, so I'm ambient. But again, ambient, right, has an E. There's no ambient with an A at the end. But ambience, maybe it just comes down to, how you prefer to say it. Are you like a fancy Frenchman, or are you more good white God-fearing American? I am not going to be the one who tells you. Okay, there's some on here that I don't understand, have never seen before. So let's include an example of that as well. Appall versus appall. Appall has 2 L's, 2 P's, 2 L's, close, open, and close book. Okay, so I don't know what Noah's thinking on this one, but he has an alternate spelling it. APPAL. That's a pal, my friend. That's someone you go to road trips with, or Antiques Roadshow tapings, or Arthur's dog. A pal. Okay. Moving on. This is a classic. This is a good one. Donut or donut. I kind of like the GH. Okay, it makes me feel fancy. It makes me feel loved. And even in Chicago, you'll see business names that have both DONUTS, dough nuts, and then other ones that are like, oh no, this is actually dough. This isn't do nuts. This is dough, GH, nuts. It's very interesting. I'm trying to think Gibson's Donuts, that's got to be a Donuts, right? Memphis, America, don't need extra letters. But Stan's Donuts, that's across the street from me. I think that's also a D-O, what am I spelling? Donuts. Okay, yeah, Stan's Donuts is Donuts. Let me check on Gibson's while I'm here. That's down in Memphis, for those of you who don't know. I think that's also Gibson's Donuts. But then there's got to be some other businesses that I just can't think of that have the classic GH, right? I can't seem to find any off the top of my head that I'm thinking of, but they certainly exist, okay? You'll just have to take my word for it. And Noah Webster lists the GH as the preferred spelling. I think the shorter version is more like new school kind of cool stuff. Okay. Another example of one that I've never heard of and would never make sense to me: enroll versus enroll, as in will enroll in a class. 2 L's, obvious, okay? 1 L, that's listed here, doesn't make sense to me. This is a classic one that brings me back to my Scott Farrell days. Glamour versus glamour. Okay, so one is like old school, more European, Glamour, and then there's also Glamor, which either one like sound or looks fine to me, but when I see that extra U in there, as in glamour, it makes me think of Scott Farrell's book, because among many very odd things about this man, and there are many, he likes to do British spellings. So like, here's an example: colour, right? This is America. No one spells color, Colour. You're going to get laughed out of every establishment in town if you buy a coloring book. Okay, this is color. So what is this Colour kind of, French pansy crap? I don't know. Get out of here. But if you read Scott Farrell's book, which I encourage you not to do, and it's actually off the market. I don't think I've mentioned this before. I would still check in on it here and there. And I've done the audiobook, all that stuff. But if you can't buy it anymore, he's delisted it, which means that friend of the podcast, Matthew Fiedler, and I, who we bought each other copies as gifts, which is hilarious. We probably honestly, knowing Scott, and I can't, judge how many copies he's sold by anything other than what I know about him and, his perceived lack of a social circle based off of his autobiography, lack of family, etc. I can't imagine that thing sold more than 10 copies. So, hey, I was going to say maybe we'll be rich someday. We won't, but it's kind of fun to know that you have that much power in your hands. And we really need a sequel, okay? I don't want to spend too much time, and I'm almost done here, I promise, talking about Scott Farrell on the Beantown Podcast for a variety of reasons. But the show ends, and he's still kind of like bumbling around Rockford, living at his grandma's house, like doing weird cam shows, just strange stuff. And now he's like legitimately like he's gone to the gym, works out a lot. He works for Amazon. He lives in Seattle. He's still single from what I can tell. I don't know how much I want to disclose here. He does a lot of really weird, kinky stuff. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. With all that in mind, yeah, we need a sequel. The Scott Farrell autobiography part 2, Not Dead Yet. Or I didn't die after I wrote the first one, I guess. Okay, here's a classic, Gray versus Gray. I have no idea on this one. I think I use both interchangeably. I don't write that word very often. And I think A feels more natural to me. E feels British, but A is considered the preferred option according to Noah Webster. Okay. Oh, this is a classic. We've already kind of done the E being swapped out or niched due to efficiency's sake. Judgment versus judgment. And here's a real question. Terminator 2. Belching a little bit here. Judgment Day. Take your guesses now. And I will as well because I haven't started typing it yet. Is there an E in the judgment a first E in the judgment as in Terminator 2 Judgment Day? So we're talking about Judgment or Judgment. This is fascinating. You got to rack your brain. You got to remember when you were a kid in the 1980s and you saw Terminator 2 Judgment Day for the first time. Is there an E? I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. And I'm going to guess no E is my guess. Terminator, this is huge. Terminator 2, no E. Well, there's one at the end. But no E in the middle of Judgment, as in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And boy, we're learning a lot. We're doing Judgment Day. We're doing spellings. This is another kind of British versus English one, but imposter versus impostor with an O or an E at the end. Who knows? This is one that I come across quite often because often I will text friends asking them if I am this or if something is wrong with me or what it is. Likable versus likable. Another one where we're trying to get more efficient. But this one is we're just kind of like moving some vowels around or getting rid of an E, keeping an E. So likable, is it like and then able, or is it like lickable? Likeable or likable? I think the longer version with the E feels like it should be right to me, but I find myself typing it without the E. Because I tend, like Noah Webster, I tend to like efficiency. I tend to move things together. I want to be quick, agile, deft, D-E-F-T. I don't think there's an alternate spelling of that, is there? What does deft mean, you might be asking? Deft, neatly, skillful, and quick in one's movements. Well, you're looking at it, folks, right here. If there's one thing I'm frequently described as, it's skillful. Okay. Let's see. We're almost done here. We're finishing up. Another one that I have never seen before, mollusk with a K, yes, versus mollusk with a C. What language is that? Klingon or something? Here we go. Oh, this is a classic French one. Omelette versus omelette. I think I like the shorter version. Omelette just seems bloated. This one I've never seen because I think they're two separate things, right? A possum versus possum. Those are two separate animals, aren't they? A possum versus possum. Okay. So we're going to get to the bottom of this. Oh, bobbila.com. How we've never been on this site before. Tried, true, trustworthy home advice. And here's an article about possums, of course. What's the difference? Possum versus opossum. Okay, yeah, here we go. So I'm feeling like this website, not bobbila.com, but dailywritingtips.com was perhaps not well researched because I wouldn't say giraffe versus elephant, right? They're different animals. Let's see. While they have similar names, possums and opossums are distinct animals. 7 key differences between these marsupials. Okay, and then he lists 7 key animals. If you're curious, and this is probably the easiest one to wrap your head around. Possums are native to Australia, New Zealand, and China, while opossums with the O live in America and southern Canada. So the ones you've seen in your lifetime, more than likely, are opossums. Okay, so there's a lot of difference going on here, which is really cool. They're really like cute animals. I don't know. I think they're neat. Okay, let's get to the end of this here. See if there's anything else that I really want to mention. Pom-pom. I don't even know. Oh, racket versus racket. That's a classic. You want to get fancy with your Q-U-E-T or stick to the American CK version. I think theater versus theater. I mean, that's an all-time classic. If that was earlier in the list, we definitely would have talked about that. And I'm trying to think, is there like an official, in terms of their definitions, difference between when you should use theater and when you should use theater with the RE versus the ER? You can look that up on your own. That'll be your homework for next week. Like DePaul's Theater School, RE. Auditorium theater, I think that's also RE. Is that just more of like a old school? No, auditorium theater, TRE. Is it just more old school? Does it mean something different? what exactly do we got going on there? So that's a good one to think about. And there's some other ones on here. Some of them are kind of interesting, but that's pretty much like what I wanted to go through here. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah. There's some other ones on there. If you want to check it out, dailywritingtips.com/50 words with alternative spellings. But you'll have to deal with this nonsense with possums and opossums. So who knows who you can trust? But I wanted to have some fun with words. I wanted to do some spelling. I wanted to be educational for the kids. So I apologize for those swear words I dropped earlier. But this turned out to be a pretty nice little episode. I tell you what, when I woke up this morning, I knew I had to record today. Tomorrow, I actually have to work, which blows. And Sunday, probably don't have anything during the day except for watching football. We have my amazing GF, Rachel, has wanted to try this restaurant for a very long time. Very hard to get a reservation. She got one for Sunday at 9 p.m. So I will be happy to go. It'll be a great date night. It's a very inconvenient time, but I'm still going to have a great time. And she knows it's an inconvenient time. I'm glad we got in. I'm glad she planned something nice for us. It's going to be great. Love you, babe. That's what I wanted to share. What we're going to do, we're going to get our music queued up. You won't hear it on YouTube because I superimpose it afterwards like a tech genius. And you'll hear it on the live or on the audio stream. Here's my call to action. What two words are spelled differently that mean the same thing or sound the same that you're curious about, that you find yourself typing in your day-to-day life? Let us know. Beantown Podcast, yahoo.com. Again, that's Beantown Podcast at yahoo.com. Maybe we'll read some of those stories live on air. Our marathon specials in 2 weeks. Our countdown to 200 is hot and heavy. That's going to be in early November. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Let's get our music queued up. YouTube, good to see you. I'll check in on you next time. Bye.